Carol Clark, live from the Herd Museum. And this is
Lorelei Stierlen, and we're out here tonight in Ken's Prairie, and hopefully we'll be able to show you some interesting spring wildflowers.
Some of the flowers have already finished, and some are just starting, and some are still to come. But every time you step into a prairie, it's a different prairie. So we'll just see what we see tonight. This is one of our first tries at filming live, so you get what you get, but at least nobody's going to lose a lot on tickets. Okay, you want to look at our first plant right over here?
Sure. We'll start off with one that's almost done right about now. This is the Baptisia Australis, the false blue indigo, and most of these are done blooming. Thankfully, Carol has a really good eye, and she was able to spot this. It's still got some unopened blooms down at the bottom here. These are obviously in the legume family. Hopefully you can see that. Do I need to pull something else out of the way?
No, I think we're good.
We are not actors. We're kind of botanist kind of ish people, so you will forgive us. But this is in the legume family, and for those of you who are not familiar with the legumes, they're one of the great ecosystem services that they provide is they are nitrogen fixers. For our soil, as one of the great contributors to our soil with that. And we'll move just a little bit backwards, and once those are done blooming, they actually create these beautiful pods, and hopefully we can see these. But again, if you just think about your average snap pea or something on steroids, that's kind of what you're going to get. And Carol has an example. Excellent. And these are from last season, but if you let them go,
hold them out here.
Get those into the sunlight. If you let them go, this is what they're going to look like. They dry out, and eventually they will open up, exposing the seeds on the inside. And he's not going to rattle for us, but there you go, and you can see the seeds on the inside of the pod. So that is our Baptisia Australis, or the false blue indigo. Absolutely gorgeous native, and thankfully Carol was able to spot one that was still blooming.
It looks like a young one, so it had trouble getting going this year.
That's all right. Let's hear it for youth.
Yeah, we'll conquer all. Okay, over here we have a little tiny flower, and we've been seeing this on identification and flower websites for the last couple weeks around Texas. This is the Lindheimer Star Daisy, or Texas Yellow Star Daisy. It's actually named after Ferdinand Lindheimer, so it's a pretty neat plant and sort of a staple of your basic blackland prairie. But there's some other things down here that really aren't blooming yet that are kind of interest. Later in the year, this plant that just looks like sort of gray-green mule's ears leaves right now is going to be a goldenrod that will bloom in the fall. And it doesn't make the big plumes that other goldenrods do. It makes sort of a flat-topped flower head. So stiff goldenrod right there. And this one here is
let me just jump in.
Sure.
Janet Kirkland requested that I turn the camera the other way. Unfortunately, Facebook Live doesn't allow me to do that. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I like this little plant right here. It's kind of an oddball thing. Some of you may recognize it, some of you may not. It's a milkweed. And this one is called wand milkweed or side cluster milkweed. It's Asclepius Veridia. The name means green flowered milkweed, but nobody really calls it that much. The really odd thing about this plant, I don't know if you can see it close up, on the top of the leaf there's a vein that sticks up.
Sorry guys. Somehow I turned it around on me.
That's our wonderful cameraman, Stephanie. And so on the top of the leaf, there's actually a vein that sticks up. But if I turn the leaf over, the vein is very flat on the back side of the leaf. And I don't really know too many plants that do that. Usually the vein sticks out on the bottom side of the leaf, but not so much on this plant. It's an oddball. Okay, Lorelei, were you ready with something over here?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. We'll just move slowly through all of this. This one you may be able to identify. Hopefully some of you will. By the way, on the measuring stick, I'm 5 foot nada. So that's the plume. So it's about 5 foot, which is actually a little bit on the shy side. Hopefully some of you out there can identify this, even though its plumes have been pretty much picked over of seeds. This is our beautiful Indian grass, one of our tall grasses from our prairie. And
so it'd be fair to say it's a good food source for like songbirds and things like that.
Birds will definitely love on this in the late fall and winter. And it also, the dried leaves from this are also an excellent source of nesting material for our birds. Because when they dry out, they become like this, but they're still pliable. They're not going to be, you know, just breaking apart in your hands like dried leaves from a tree would. These will remain pliable, and they actually will come apart. You can tear them in half. So birds will actually pick up a lot of these materials from our native clump grasses or bunch grasses, like the Indian grass. And you see on this is hopefully the color comes through. There's almost a bluish hint on the stem of the Indian grass, which one of the reasons why I find this to be such an attractive plant. It's one of the reasons I love it. Is it's very different in color to the other bunch grasses, which are far more green. This one has a bit of blue to it.
And Melanie just pointed out that Indian grass is a butterfly host plant for skippers.
Oh, that's great information. Yay. In the fall, these seed heads that are way up there, 5 feet tall, are just drop dead gorgeous. There's a sort of a yellow and gold honey colors that come through in those big plumes of seed heads. Yep. But that's not till about October. So you have to keep checking back to see everything about a prairie.
Unless I'm mistaken, this is a Vernonia. Don't know, but I'm guessing maybe Baldwini.
I think so. That's a western ironweed right there.
And for those of you who have these are going to not start blooming for some time yet. These are much more into the late June, early July time frame. They like to bloom when it's a little bit hotter, but the leaves on these are very soft, very supple, almost fuzzy.
Hot pink for the hot weather.
Yeah, and those are very definitely a pollinator magnet. Absolutely gorgeous plant. Love that one.
Yeah. Let's go over here and see this Indian plantain. Okay. So right here we've got, and you need to get the sun behind you, right?
I think. Let's see.
A really cool plant that grows out here in a good prairie remnant. You'll find these. You won't find them in a site that's been disturbed a whole lot unless somebody's gone to the trouble to put them back there. This is one of our prairie indicator plants, saying that this piece we know was fairly good at one time. It's Indian plantain or prairie plantain, but it's not really a plantain. It's just called that because the leaves look similar to a plantain that you'd find that really is in the genus Plantago. This is Arno Glossop, and these little buds up top are quite bizarre looking. The little flowers are actually right at the very tips. I don't know if we can find any that are in full bloom right now. They don't look a whole lot different than that when they're in full bloom. When they go to seed, they'll lose little bits of fluff almost like a dandelion. I think the coolest thing about this plant is if you feel a leaf.
There you go. There are some that are open.
Yeah, there
right
they go, in bloom.
Little teeny tiny opening just at the very end.
Yeah. If you feel a leaf, it always feels a little cool to the touch. And I think that's because not only is it kind of thick and leathery, it's really hairless. So it makes good contact with your skin and transfers a lot of heat away. It just feels cool.
They're also noted for the red striping along the stems, which is sort of a telltale sign of these. And I can tell you, if you've recently burnt a fragment like we did at the Raptor Center, boy howdy do these plants come strong.
They
because
do.
They are finally getting an opportunity to be in the sun, and they shoot way up right off the bat once the grasses have been
with that basal rosette down below, this circle of leaves at the very base, if the grasses get too tall around them, then they get deprived of light, and so they do better after a disturbance like a burn that clears all that grass out above them.
And I just want to mention, if anybody has questions, feel free to post them in the comment section, and I'll try to convey those to Carol and Lorelei Okay.
And we won't make stuff up. We'll tell you we don't know if we don't know. Yeah, that's good. So here is one of our little prairie skullcaps. And we think this one is Scutellaria drumondii. The neat thing about skullcaps is they have this little scoop perched above the back of each flower. And once those flowers have died and gone on to form seed pods below them, that little scoop is poised right above that seed pod. And when it rains, it gets hit by a raindrop, bops down and hits that seed pod, which then bursts open and throws seeds out into the rain. So this plant actually has an adaptation to disperse its seeds just at the right time when it's raining.
Peter Williams is asking if the prairie plantain is a perennial.
Yes, I believe it is.
It is.
Okay. Yes, Peter.
All right, I'm gonna shift positions here. Another good reason to wear knee pads in the field. But some of you may recognize this. This is one of our beautiful annuals. This is actually a ringo, and you'll notice it's shaped a little bit like a pineapple with the pointy top, and yes, it is very pointy and sharp when this thing is in bloom. But the flower itself will actually be a very bright, vibrant purple color. Very beautiful. This will typically bloom much later on towards the end of summer going into the fall, but it looks like little purple pineapples and they're really neat. These are also multiple flowers in one place, so you will find that a lot of your butterflies and bees, your pollinators, are going to flock to these. Bumbles are particularly fond of them, as well as skippers.
I'm always surprised that they're in the carrot family too.
Yes, yeah. It's one of the weirdisms of this world because it looks like it should, because it's pointy and it sticks you, and everybody wants to think it's in the thistle family.
Tony is asking if all the skullcaps in the wild are that color.
This kind, mostly. There are some that are more pale, but for the most part purple. The pink one that you find at plant sales is actually a different species.
Okay. And Deb, regarding the sound, if you find that you want to go back to be able to hear better, somebody was mentioning the speakers, this video will be available on Facebook later. I'll also be posting it to YouTube, and so you'll be able to play with the sound a little better if you want to go back and watch it again. So just in case you miss out on anything. Okay?
All right, so down here we found a very lovely example of a wine cup. That's another reason. So you get an idea of how small this is. Do you know which particular one this is?
That'd be pedata.
Okay, so this is pedata, and you can see this is not particularly tall at all. How tall do these normally get, Carol?
About 2 feet.
Okay, so this little guy is obviously quite small, but he's making the most of the situation for himself. But just a very beautiful magenta color. If you have the standing wine cup in an area around you, it is blooming right now quite vigorously, and it really does give an amazing color to a prairie area. Just going to break some stuff off. Back up ever so slightly.
Lori Shepard is asking if you can talk about the difference between wine cup mallow and palm leaf.
Wine cup mallow and what?
Palm leaf? Sorry,
Okay.
I have a bite on my ankle.
Wine cups are in the genus Caliroi, and we have standing wine cups and spreading wine cups, and a couple other kinds here in North Texas. There's about 6 kinds in Texas altogether. So this one is the standing wine cup, and it should be taller. It's got a tough growing situation here. We're on site, so it's a little easier for us to see that the soil is pretty terrible right here in this particular spot. But there's also the spreading wine cap, which opens a little more and spreads lower. Mallows, that's the family that the wine cups are all in. And so there are a lot of other things in the mallow family too, and like hibiscus and other things. And there are some things that are just plain called mallow. So one of the common names for wine cups is poppy mallow, and that's no more or less correct than wine cups. I don't know if I answered your question, Lori. If I didn't, you can try again.
Well, she said something about palm leaf, P-A-L-M leaf. Palm leaf.
The spreading wine cups and the standing wine cups we've been talking about both have a leaf with palmate lobes. And so either one of those might be called palm-leaved mallow.
Let's see if I can get it. Oh, I did it again. Sorry.
So hopefully you can see the leaf on this.
The very young leaves on any of these mallows are more shield-shaped. They're not lobed like that. And as the plant grows, the more mature leaves get very, we call it incised, where they have all those little cutouts in the edges.
Okay.
I'm going to go back for the...
Yeah. And we'll go back with it just a little bit more. All right, one of my particular favorites. This is the Indian paintbrush, which is sort of typical at this time of year in areas. The Indian paintbrush is an annual, and it is sort of this somewhere between a red. This one happens to be a little bit more on the salmon orangish kind of side. This is in contrast to the Prairie paintbrush, which is a lavender or purple color. That one is a perennial. The interesting thing about the paintbrush family happens to be that they are a hemiparasitic, which means if the seeds are to germinate and be able to successfully grow into a plant, their roots need to be able to grow into the roots of a host. And for these guys, the host is actually a number of our different native bunch grasses, such as little blue stem. Okay. So if you don't have the bunch grasses, then you are not going to be successful in being able to get these to grow. Even if you do have the bunch grasses, sometimes you're not able to get those to grow. I've been trying for 7 years and no luck yet.
Tell them it's not one to transplant into your garden.
Yeah, it's not one that you're going to be able to transplant. There are a few species here, the paintbrush being one of them, and the false foxglove or Prairie Angelinus is another one. It also is a hemiparasitic. It does need a host to come with it. So unless you happen to goof and get the host as well as the plant itself, when you go dig one, if you're trying to rescue some plants somewhere, unfortunately, it may continue to bloom and finish blooming, but any seeds, they're not going to be able to successfully grow into a plant the following year.
So Tara Dooner is asking how this differs from the A&M red bonnet flower. And it's important to note that that's actually
It's in the lupin family,
Yeah.
the pea family, the red bonnet pea.
No, go ahead.
they're,
I'm clueless
they're
on
actually
this
related to blue bonnets.
one. Like
whereas
we said, it's pure honesty here, guys. I am clueless.
We're all punting tonight. The white or the paintbrush is actually a whole different family than the blue bonnet. The Aggie red bonnets are blue bonnets with a color anomaly. And they're all in the pea family. But this one it used to be in the Scrofulariaceae family, and now it is in the Orobanche family. And it's just a whole different family of plants.
So it's just a
Superficial
coincidence.
similarity because they both form a short, dense plume, and that's about it. Yeah. Shall we look at this one over here?
Sure, go ahead. Lead on.
All right. This is actually one of my favorite springtime wildflowers. It's a Prairie Verbena, and it used to even have verbena in its name. They keep messing with the names though, so now it's Glandularia bipennatipida, and it's almost a joke with plant people that the names never seem to get shorter when they change them, always longer. But the thing I love about this is that it is a very good nectar source for spring butterflies. And even monarchs, some of the larger butterflies, will use this and love this, even though it's not a very big plant. It blooms reliably for most of the year, so you can find it starting in about February in a lot of years, and then on right through November. I've even transplanted one in July from underneath a swing set where it was trampled, and it did quite well. So it's a pretty neat plant, very tough. Lots of color and lots of butterfly uses. I don't know what that little thing is, but it's cute. We'll skip it since we don't know.
We don't know what it is, but it's cute.
Let's go see something we do know.
Okay. We're walking. We're
I love Fleabane. There's some people who are not into this. They just consider this like, you know, a funny little weed.
it has a little color.
This is Philadelphia Fleabane. This is another one of the early bloomers. These guys have been blooming probably for about the last 2 to 3 weeks, depending. They sort of bloom for an extended period of time, but they look like, you know, little mini daisies. But you can see how many petals there are on this. Absolutely gorgeous native, and this is the Philadelphia Fleabane, I believe.
How do you tell the difference? We do have an annual Fleabane and a more perennial Fleabane here, I think. And I'm not positive how you tell the difference on those. One of them has sort of fluffier and more petals. But we won't. It could be Philadelphia. I'm not going to argue with Lorelei.
I'm going based off the leaves, okay?
There you go.
There's a little lag in the questions, and Janet asked if this is different if the verbena is different from the Dakota vervain, or are those the same?
I have heard it called that.
Okay.
Yeah, common names are always a little tricky because one plant can have many common names, and many plants can have the same common name. So there's about 30 plants you might call buttercups, but I could also call a gum bumelia about 13 different local names that people use.
Thanks for clarifying.
Oh, I've got something fun over here.
Marble seed that's curled.
And that's how we like it.
I love our marble seed curled. I don't know why, but you know, if I could get into the weird position too. So this is our marble seed plant. This is a relatively young one. He's only got one stalk. These are a good shrub here, native to Collin County. And as Carol was pointing out, you see they curl rather like a shrimp. And they're kind of woolly, and hopefully you can see the leaves with the sun behind it, but you can see all the hairs on the leaves of this. In terms of showy flowers, certainly not showy, but certainly adds a lot of really, I think, great interest in a garden. One of these days I will have one of these in my yard. I want one of these.
Anne Sanson is asking Carol if the Fleabane isn't the eggplant.
Yes, it is. So he's actually referring to a recent blog post on my blog, carolsworld.net, where I call this the eggplant. I had a tiny child notice that those little white daisies with the yellow centers look like fried eggs. So you can go read the story at carolsworld.net.
Shameless plug, shameless plug. No, there's lots of good stuff out there. All right, I'm going to back up just a little bit here, and I'm sure we'll find taller ones. But this is our native Leatris, or Leatris. Leatris?
Yes.
Okay, Leatris. I always get it wrong, and
Probably
I
depends
will
on your accent.
I will also massacre Latin if you give me half a chance.
Yeah, me too. I don't actually mind where you put the accent.
This is the one that in the fall, this is going to be a big supporter of our pollinators. Very definitely beloved of the monarchs when these bloom. Quite a number of folks from NIPSOT this past year, yours truly included, we had our summer hit hard, hit hot, and really dry right around that August time frame, and we really didn't get much in blooms on some of these. The ones that waited a little while was just really dried out, and so they didn't really come into a full bloom. A lot of them went sort of brownish and really did not provide the kind of nectar that we would have liked. The ones that bloomed a little bit earlier in the summer were ahead of the game because they actually got to come out and fully bloom. But a lot of the ones that were going to open later did not.
I just heard a hummingbird behind me.
What?
I just heard a hummingbird behind me.
Well, we missed the hummingbird, folks. We heard
Go
it.
there and talk about the honeysuckle then, and that's probably where he's heading me. We'll actually catch him by accident.
All right, let's talk about something that's not native. The hazards
A cautionary tale.
a cautionary tale.
Yeah. So if you can't be a really good example, you can always be a horrible warning. This plant is one of those. It's a Japanese honeysuckle, and here at the Herd Museum, it's taken over lots and lots of the forest space where it completely covers bushes. It will climb up into trees and basically shade them out. So it weakens the trees both by adding weight to the branches, which might break, and by stealing nutrients and water from the soil that the tree could use, and by just plain shading it out where it can't get enough light. It's very happy here in North Texas, even though it originally came from Asia. And it's one of those things that we'd rather not see in the woods, simply because it takes away from the resources of the native plants that could be here.
And back to the Liatris. Cindy is asking if that's Liatris mucronata.
Yes, it is.
Or mucronata.
Yeah, you'll also see that listed as Liatris punctata mucronata, where the variety is mucronata and the species is actually punctata. But they're pretty much equivalent. We can go look at the blooming sumac and, yeah, let's go this way.
Sumac, and we can do Maximilians. I think these are Maximilians. These are Maximilians, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Yes, we are actively trying to get rid of the honeysuckle.
Well, good. This would be a nice thing. Good luck on that. Let me know how it turns out for you, because I've got some of that nasty stuff in Brockdale Park that I've got to get rid of.
Well, Sherry is asking if the herd is actively trying to get rid of honeysuckle. Our sanctuary manager, when he does projects, does get rid of invasive species.
As much as possible.
As much as possible.
And the herd does use volunteer labor for a lot of those kinds of projects, and can always use people to do that kind of thing.
That is correct.
Okay, so let's look at this one. Right here, we have just barely beginning to bloom a rough leaf dogwood. It's only got 2 little flowers open, maybe 3. The rest are still buds. We'll probably see one in better bloom later, but it's a good place to have a look at the leaves with this little herringbone vein pattern. It's one of the It's one of the few shrubs that has opposite leaves. Here's one that's in the sun up here. I don't know if that'll...
Actually, the sun is really bright.
Oh, it's what's causing us problems.
Can you guys see that? I won't know until a couple minutes.
And these leaves are arranged opposite on the stem, just like your arms, right across from each other on that stem. So dogwood, rough leaf dogwood, it's nothing at all like the big showy dogwoods that you see in the acid sandy soils of East Texas. Here at the Herd Museum, we are on heavy black alkaline clay. And so this is our local dogwood here. There's a sumac behind that. I'm checking down to see how much poison ivy I'm standing in. And I'm going to walk in here.
Now would be a good time to
show you this.
Oh, those are nice.
The leftovers from last year's sumac bloom. These are sumac berries that somehow the birds missed. We have birds and raccoons and possums, all kinds of things eat sumac berries. But that is what they would look like. Oops, we got the leaves in your way again. There we go. Leaves everywhere.
I think that's a good view.
There, and then can you get a picture of it? It's just starting to bloom.
Sure.
It's about to burst into bloom. And the neat thing about sumacs blooming is that once they're in bloom, you will have so many little butterflies and so many bees using them. You can usually hear them before you even see them, because it will just be covered with bees. Now those bees are very busy gathering supplies for their own use. They're not really interested in you, so you can still walk up and watch them do that.
A couple of other things that are interesting about our rough leaf dogwood. It does produce berries after the blooms. They're very small white berries, and those are enjoyed by the birds, obviously, in the summertime months, and usually by fall those are pretty picked over, but those are enjoyed, and that is one method that it has for ensuring the continuation of its genetics. The whole purpose of everything on this earth is to pass on genetics, with notable exceptions.
And speaking of, the poison ivy is about to bloom.
It's really pretty good from this view. You get a little sun on it. So we hear a lot, leaves of 3, let it be, which drives me just about nuts, because there are lots of plants with 3 leaves in a cluster or 3 leaflets like poison ivy, and not all of them are dangerous plants. Poison ivy does have 3 leaflets. I'm going to change sticks now, so my trusty stick won't get poison ivy all over it. And you can see, oh, these are kind of stuck together. I think a spider got hold of that. You can see a central leaflet, the one I have my stick on, and 2 side leaflets. These 3 together make one whole leaf of poison ivy. And then if I bend the whole plant over with my poison ivy stick, you'll be able to see that each of those leaves, which are made up of the 3 leaflets, are attached alternately up the stem, not opposite. We
What?
have a little local tree, the box elder, that has leaves that look almost like this. They'll be opposite on the stem, while the poison ivy is always alternate.
Warn me before you let go.
Yeah, poison ivy does bloom, and it also makes berries that the birds like. Those berries will be white. I don't really know of too many white berries that people should eat.
Oh, there you go. But the other thing with the rough-leaf dogwood is belt and suspenders. If the seeds don't get dispersed, it also clones itself. So it is a great native tree if you are interested, but do be aware that it will clone itself and you will get more of them popping up nearby. So this is a heads up on that one.
So here's a nice overall Baptisia. You could have
Just mind that.
all out of this section.
Thank you. Because it's hard to watch the camera and...
Yeah, it sure is. Should we talk about this thistle?
Sure.
It's a little mothy, and I think we could probably do better.
There's one right there.
Yeah, let's look at this one. Now, if you grew up on a farm, you probably have strong feelings about thistles. Many people do. It's either love them or hate them. Almost nobody is neutral about thistles. But there are thistles and then there are thistles. This one is one of our beautiful native thistles that doesn't tend to grow so densely and isn't so aggressive as the non-native invaders. One of the ways you're going to be able to tell the difference between the natives and the non-natives is to look at the backs of the leaves. On our native thistles, the backs are a pale color compared to the tops, which are bright green. And the stem in between the leaves is quite naked. It doesn't have spiny ruffles up and down the stem. Some of our non-native thistles will have a spiny ruffle all between the leaves up and down that stem. So this one is probably Cirsium texanum, maybe Cirsium Anglemanii, but it is one of our native thistles. We'll have to wait and see it bloom to tell which one.
Amy, this will be available in several other places after this in answer to your question.
Okay.
She missed the first part.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'll just let you move in and take that one. So this little plant, cloth of gold, used to be called Lesquerella, which was a mouthful. This is actually one of those that got a shorter, Physaria. It's a little bit easier now. But the neat thing about this is the teeny little seed pods, tiny little bladders. That's how it gets its name, bladder pod. And in some places in the spring, this short, early spring bloomer, you can see it's been blooming for quite a while. It's been blooming since the flowers were down here and they have proceeded up that stem. I just cover a whole hillside or a whole meadow with these beautiful gold flowers. So it's called cloth of gold because sometimes it can look like there's just been a big golden cloth spread across the field.
And Melanie was also pointing out about the thistle being host plant for the painted lady.
I am so glad Melanie's with us tonight. This is good.
Good to be out here, Melanie.
Yeah, Lorelei's got something cool over here.
Maybe we can do another host plant walk or something.
Yeah,
There you go. We need a
get
host
Melanie
plant
out.
walk. All right, maybe Melanie knows what this one is. Now this one's the woolly plainsman. All right.
Woolly white or old plainsman?
Woolly white or old plainsman. This is a nice little unassuming one from out here. And this I've seen in a couple other fragments, but this is for the small bees. This is very definitely a nice little source of nectar. Melanie will know whether or not somebody likes to lay eggs on this. I don't, but this is, and you can see on the foliage on this, you can see it going up, and it's very lacy, very dainty. I happen to like this one. It's very pretty. It just dots itself around, and if you're lucky, you actually happen to be in a fragment when it's blooming. Otherwise, you miss it. It blink and you miss a lot of prairie.
Yeah, it's worth visiting once a week. If you find a prairie, you can visit.
There you go. Or every day if you have the opportunity.
Yeah.
All right, now we're going mobile, folks. Mind your legs. We've got.
Oh, just the stickers.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about? Greenbrier?
We can talk about the greenbrier because we're just trotting through it, getting stuck on it, and maybe this is all talk about. Yeah, greenbrier is an interesting one. I always associated greenbrier, which, you can see the lovely examples.
Yeah.
I always associate this with part of the understory.
Yeah, here it is out in the middle of a prairie instead of growing in the woods as an understory vining plant. And it can almost look shrubby when it's out here. It's kind of a little different. The leaves stay smaller when it's in full sun. They don't have to grow as big to collect the sun, but they will be a little bit more something squishy on that one. I didn't know there was a caterpillar, but you can see he ate half the leaves before I got there. Poor little guy. He'll climb back up after we leave. What I did want to say about these greenbriers is that the shoots are incredibly nutritious. So animals like deer and other things will eat those growing tips right off, and they have an incredible amount of protein in them. They're very nutritious. I've been told that the nutrition profile of a greenbrier shoot is approximately like asparagus. It's got a lot of vitamin K in it and some other things as well.
That's an interesting one.
So I haven't looked that up lately, but that's what I'm told.
But that's very typical. You would not, where you have a fire regimen going on, you will not typically find the greenbrier out in the open areas.
Yeah.
If fire is coming through, even if it's sporadic every 5 or 6 years, you're not going to find that out in the open. That one gets burnt. But where you don't have much fire happening, then this can actually turn itself into quite an interesting habitat for birds and other small wildlife, because this will actually kind of mound up on itself. It's one that likes to be in the forest. It has something to climb on, to lean on, to grab onto. Obviously, out in a grassland, it doesn't have any of that. So what it does is it kind of finds its own, and they all grow together. And they get a nice thicket going, and that, oddly, will work to the advantage of certain bird species, such as, I'm sorry, I gotta do it, quail.
And the painted bunting.
Yes.
The female painted bunting is just the color of greenbriers, and she's hidden very well when her nest is down here in a greenbrier thicket.
Somebody asked if that's saw greenbrier. Is that a common name for this?
Smilax bonanox, I think, is the one that's frequently called saw greenbrier. But we have a bunch of greenbrier species in North Texas, and they're all Smilax something or other. So this one I'm not positive, might be bonanox. I can't quite tell.
And yes, it does have thorns.
Yes, it
Somebody
does.
is asking.
Yes, it does.
Which is another good thing for the bunting.
Yeah, here's a ferny. All right, so we have a number of little ferny items on the prairie like this. Some of them are mimosas, some of them are what used to be called acacias, now they're acaciellas. And I think this one is the white blooming Prairie Acacia. There's a one that grows, well, a couple that grow very low to the ground, and those would be the mimosas. Some of these pea family plants with the fine little leaves like this have a habit of closing up their leaves when they're disturbed. And it's just sort of a defensive adaptation. If you're all folded up, you're less likely to be eaten.
And I will post a slow motion video of that later, so watch for it.
We're having effects.
Special effects.
Special effects coming later. Right. So, I'll pay homage to this guy, the evening primrose. Most people are not overly enthusiastic. Some would, in fact, call this a weed. If you get this into your yard, this will try to take over. Very, very aggressive, but out in the open where it has a lot of competition, you don't have quite that problem. But as you can see, this one's not the nicest of specimens, but you can see down in the center the structure of that, and I think that's really beautiful. This is one I love to photograph. I'll never grow it in a yard situation again, but I do love photographing this plant. Usually it's quite open. It looks kind of like a big satellite dish. But this, again, he's in tough terrain, and it's kind of towards the end of the blooming period for these guys. All right. Back to you, Carol.
All right, over here I have this weird object. And maybe if I put a hand behind it, it might be easier to focus on it. I don't know. These are the leftover...
Oops, I did it again.
Oops. Okay,
I'm not
these
sure
are
how
the
I do it.
leftover seed pods or seed heads of a horsemint or a what do you call that? Monarda citriodora, usually just
lemon
called
bee balm.
horsemint or lemon bee balm. And if you were to rub these, you would find the odor of sort of lemon pine sol wafting up at you. They're really quite strong, especially when there's fresh foliage on the plant. The flowers are all stacked up in these little, you know, almost different floors of a building. And they would be purple and white with purple and pink bracts. Quite pretty when they're blooming. They're still to come a little bit later this year.
Sundrops.
Yeah, see that one.
All right. Which is this? Heart Wiggy? Heart.
I think it's
do we know what- Okay. Which one is it?
I think it's Berlanders, but I'm not.
Okay, Berlanders.
Berlin time.
All right, but most people are going to know this as Sundrops.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, when you buy the Compacta or Compact Gold or whatever it's called, it looks quite different. I'm going to try to clear some stuff away from this so you can see what one of our native wild ones looks like. So it's not that, you know, plush, sort of bushy kind of plant. You've got a single stem coming up with some very narrow, attractive foliage, I think. It's got sort of like the sawtooth edges on it. And then the blooms up at the end. That's another nice spring bloomer, even if you get the one that's, I guess, it's some kind of a, you know, words have failed me. What is it called? Cultivar, that's it. If you get a cultivar, it will have a lot more blooms, obviously, on it. It will fill up a pot on your patio quite nicely. It doesn't take an awful lot of water, but the bees, particularly if you have a lot of honeybees will love rolling around on the inside of that. They're comical to watch.
Okay, so let's go over here and see what's happening down on the floor.
Oh,
Okay.
got some.
So I am fishing around way down here on the floor of the prairie. At the soil level, you can see there's actually quite a bit of open soil in this prairie. But what is this stuff? Oh, it's weird.
Nostoc.
It's crunchy. It's black. And it looks pretty terrible. But if I were to put this in a little bit of water, and you can see it's quite crumbly and dry, it would, in about 5 minutes, form a green gelatinous sheet
Do you have one?
that wouldn't be slippery and it wouldn't be gross or slimy, but it will stick together in one big green sheet. And this is actually a mat of cyanobacteria. It's not quite an algae, it's not quite a critter, it's not quite a plant. It does have some chlorophyll, so we'll include it tonight. But it's called nostoc. Stephanie was right about that. Crunchy when dry, quite cool when hydrated.
Maybe we can do a small video on that later. Yeah, I didn't bring water either. We didn't do the plantain? I thought we did.
No, the prairie parsley.
Oh.
It's got something to do.
Okay. My God, that's tiny. It's a Coreopsis. Oh, hail the Coreopsis.
Cool.
I think that's a No! Bob, bad me.
Oh, and there's
Not a Coreopsis. This is actually green thread. All right, and Melanie, you can tell me which butterfly it is that uses this as a host plant. I know somebody does.
There's a one-legged beetle in there.
Yeah, okay, well. All right, we'll ignore the beetle. We technically don't necessarily consider him a great pollinator, but you never know, maybe he is. The bees, particularly the small, the hair streaks, are very fond of this, and then also your small native bees are. But this is called green thread, and I don't know why it has the name green thread, but it may have to do with the foliage, which looks kind of, you know, thread-like or needle-like. Very attractive little plant. This, again, he's not in the greatest of conditions out here. This actually will get fairly large around when it's in a healthy condition. And these will have many blooms on them, several dozens at a time. Oh, standing up now. I like when I can find something out here.
Yeah.
Something I can recognize.
Here's a Baptisia that will show the whole form of the plant where the seeds are is where the flowers were. So you get those bright purples that stick way up above the plant when it's blooming, followed by this neat mound of foliage and those seed pods.
I'd never really studied the seed pods from this angle. It's kind of pretty
It's usually really neat.
from this angle.
You want to go across and deal with some yuccas?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, we're going to take you on a hike.
Across the room.
Geese in the distance. Find some.
This one is not quite open yet. They've actually just started to bloom. This is prairie parsley. Gorgeous native.
Clean that
And
up a little bit.
this, yeah.
Yeah.
This is one of the natives that are the host of the black swallowtail butterfly. And a very, very attractive plant. Again, that umbral shape. You get a lot of bang for your buck if you're a pollinator, because you can just hang out in one area, sipping in great leisure and enjoying the afternoon without having to waste a lot of energy going from plant to plant to plant. But they will definitely lay their eggs on these. And Carol, you said you already have
I
seen
saw
some.
big fat caterpillars Saturday on prairie parsley up near the Red River. So yes, they're out there this time of year.
Yeah. Another example of this, it's in the same family, is the golden Alexanders. Okay, and that's also plays host to the same butterfly, the black swallowtail. I am not certain. I've not had them show preference for one or the other. They will lay eggs equally on both of them.
Yeah, I think they're pretty flaky. They use a lot of things in the parsley family. Yeah. So I think we get this one again.
And back to the Baptisia, somebody was asking what the pods were on. That is on the Baptisia Australis.
Yeah, it sure was.
And Melanie also pointed out that that is also the host plant for the dainty sulfur.
Thank you, sulfur. Excellent, Melanie. Thank you.
It's kind of hard to keep up with the comments and the...
Okay. We're trying to film, read, and walk. I'm happy if I can just walk.
At least I don't have any gum that I'm chewing.
Oh, super. We're headed in that direction, but there you go. There's a nice open one right there.
Oh yeah.
So that way
color
you
might
can
show
really
better.
get sort of the
There we
inside
go.
of it. It gives you a nice view inside of an opened evening primrose. They're very pretty, very lovely. But again, when you turn them loose in a setting of a yard, they don't have competition and they will spread everywhere.
Melanie also pointed out that the prairie parsley blooms in the second year.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did not know that, but thank you.
So these are yucca flowers. Wow, look at that. There's a big
What is that?
spider inside this one.
Oh, it's one of those little crab
A
spiders.
big crab spider. And usually crab spiders try to match themselves to the color of the flower they're on. This guy's not too concerned because this was more or less closed up until a second ago. Uh-huh. But
What are you doing?
These flowers have an unusual life history. Most flowers are pollinated more or less by accident by creatures that are gathering pollen or nectar and happen to pick up pollen and spread it to another flower. The yucca is very different. It's pollinated deliberately by a yucca moth.
Oh.
And that moth will gather pollen and roll it into a ball and then literally take it away and stick it right onto the stigma of another yucca flower a little bit farther away. And in that way, a yucca does not pollinate itself. The yucca moth then lays her eggs right into the developing ovary of that flower, and she only lays just enough to ensure that all her larvae will have enough heat, but there will still be enough seeds left over to develop and stay fertile so that the yucca can also pass on its genetics.
So Lindsay Nicole Thomas is asking what are a few popular host plants for monarchs?
Monarchs, we have milkweeds and milkweed vines for monarchs. So we passed quite a few on the way out here, and I've seen one, and it's like farther down there. So we're gonna walk back that way in a minute and show you some.
I will, however, have Stephanie turn around. We'll do the homage to one of our berry producers. It's a little bit moth-eaten, but still. This is our native dewberry, and this is in the process of ripening. These will turn a nice bright red pretty soon. Birds absolutely love these. But this is dewberry, and typically you're going to find him. He may get propped up on some other plants if he's in the midst of an awful lot of other things, but generally he's going to be creeping along the ground.
And a lot of people do confuse it with blackberry.
Yes, they are not the same. They are edible.
They're similar,
leave 'em for
but different.
birds.
And they're both of the same genus, just not the same species. We actually have about 5 or 6 rubus species here in North Texas. Here's a beautiful marble seed plant. Pretty good example. We're hauling Stephanie right through the rough stuff.
That's
She is
okay.
trying to film and walk, so we appreciate her efforts.
The dewberry is consumable, but always make sure that you know exactly what you're eating before you stick anything in your mouth. And also know your personal allergies. Consult a doctor. It's my disclaimer.
Thank you. That's
That
a
works.
good
Don't
disclaimer.
forage unless you know what you're doing, or you could make yourself violently ill. Don't do
Yeah,
it.
there's been some real foolishness around on the internet lately, so make sure that you are actually learning from somebody who can really identify plants before you put anything in your mouth.
We don't want anybody sick.
Yeah. So I'd like to point out those tall yuccas over
Oh,
there.
that's
I
beautiful.
don't know if you can zoom in. Before the yucca flowers kind of blow out like the ones that we just saw,
Oh, it did let me
they
zoom
look
in.
like big hanging bells on these very tall spikes, and they start out pretty tight and then gradually open up like that.
Anne asked if marble seed is rare / uncommon or not.
It is really only found on fairly decent prairie remnants. We don't see it around in disturbed sites that have just recently, grown a crop of wildflowers. It's usually in a pretty good place. So rare, technically no. Uncommon, yes.
Some Barbara. Are those Barbara's? Okay. Oh wow.
Can you get a shot of this bush? So, and I'm looking down. I don't see any poison ivy.
I see a
So
little
all
bit.
the way- Yeah, you're
there.
right. There's one. Okay.
I just will be careful.
I'm going to try to show you, without getting into the poison ivy, the flowers of the rough-leaf dogwood. And let's see if you can just get a shot of the big,
Is this okay?
yeah.
Am I doing it right?
Yeah. And then I want you to show that cluster back there, like the big, there we go. So this is actually a big thicket of rough-leaf dogwood, not one plant, but one plant that has set up runners. And so it has cloned itself and sending up shoots everywhere.
And also there's quite a bit of honeysuckle back there.
Yeah,
as
there's
well.
a little bit, the yellow parts are honeysuckle. There's some yellow and white honeysuckle back there. But this, if it were sunny and earlier in the day, would be covered with butterflies and native bees. They really, really love these plants. They're apparently very good food sources for some of our tiny little creatures. And later on in the season, they will also have white berries, which the birds love. People should not eat this plant.
People do not eat this plant. If you don't know what it is,
Don't eat it.
This is the example of being a wonderful example of what not to do. A lot of people are going to probably recognize this, hopefully by now. This is called black medic, and this is a nasty one. I have now had my question answered as to what happens if black medic gets into a prairie area. This is everywhere throughout Ken's Prairie. It has this little yellow flower head, and it's multiple flowers in one, very tiny. I've not seen anybody nectaring off of this plant. Maybe someone has. But once this goes to seed, this thing produces a ton of seeds that are very easily transported on shoes, on tires, and it goes everywhere. I've been battling this at Brockdale Park, and it is nightmarish because thankfully it has not gotten into my main fragments, but it definitely got very close. Too close for comfort. It was on my trail. So this is a nasty one. Watch out for it. Again, just the fact that, you know, it maybe you're not thinking about it and you're walking through an area that's urban and it's just in your yard or something like that, be aware this can get onto your shoes and you can transport it into other areas. For people who are hiking, trekking, spelunking, always wash your gear, folks.
Stuck to your socks, stuck in your boot treads.
Yep.
These are the leaves of our local coneflower. This is Echinacea Angustifolia. It has narrow, fuzzy leaves when you compare it to the one that you can get at the big box stores. But look where it is. It's out here in this unirrigated prairie, absolutely growing itself with just available rainfall. It does not need supplemental water. It does do fine in a garden setting. It may not be quite as big and purple as the other one, but it's a lovely plant.
It looks like it may actually be a native ant mound,
yeah,
based on there are a few holes.
No, I stepped on it earlier.
It looks like they dug a tree out.
Not sure
Oh, you
what
think so?
this was. Could be a tree got dug out.
Okay. I just saw the little holes.
Something, but I don't think it's following out here.
That's not what I thought it was. Oh, here. No, that's not it either. I saw something and now I don't see it. Okay.
All right.
We'll move on. Let's go find a milkweed for the milkweed people.
Let's go find a milkweed. We have 122 people watching.
Oh, glad you're all here. Thank you for your patience with our inexperience in this format. We're learning, and I'm sure it can only get better.
And we would welcome anyone who would like to try their hand on it for, you know, a guided tour of their favorite remnant. We would love that.
So let's look at this peppergrass. This is a peppergrass, and it's not really a grass, but it does taste a little peppery. And so it's got a really odd little seed pods that stick all over the place. Teeny tiny little white flowers when it's blooming. This is actually done blooming, and those are just the pods that are left at this point. But you will find this on every little disturbed area. This is literally growing right out of the gravel of the road where it's been scraped and gravel's been thrown here. So this is not a particularly rich remnant area. It's just something you would find on the side of the road like this.
And Nancy asked if this is an area open to the herd hikers. Technically, right over along here is the edge of the Cedar Break Trail. So if you are on the Cedar Break Trail, it will loop back around and take you along that way. So technically you can come view this area, just not this is a service area, so for safety.
So this is one that's very easily obtainable. This is Angleman's Daisley, or the cut leaf daisy. And as you can see, these blooms are pretty far along. That's one of the hallmarks of the cut leaf or Angleman's daisy, is that as the bloom ages, those petals actually fold downwards. So they actually look like that on the underside. Hopefully you can see that a little bit without my finger being too much in the way.
See it, yeah.
But you'll see that they curl under, which is somewhat unusual. I don't know if there are any other plants, I'm sure there are, that do this, but I've not seen them. And again, very fuzzy leaves, very thick leaves. Just in case anybody is curious on these, the type of leaf that you're going to have on plants here are going to be designed for a number of things. Number one, they don't want to be palatable. They don't want to be eaten. So having hairy leaves is one way that they can reduce some of the foraging on themselves. Also, that will help them to retain moisture. So, and it will help direct it, because if you think of rain falling on this, it's going to not just drip down, but it's actually going to get caught on the hairs of this, which will more gently disperse it down to the base and to the roots. That cuts down on erosion issues, actually. Rain splash. Cool stuff.
So while we're walking, Sherry was asking, herd hikers, we do, yes, ask you to stay on the trails. Because you're not aware of what these plants are and things like that, and just so that we can preserve them, we do ask that you stay on the trail.
There are certainly some unusual to rare things at the herd. And if you can't ID what's under your foot with every step, you're just better off staying on the trail.
Don't crush the green dragon.
I can't tell you guys how nervous I was the whole time that I was going to step on something while I was looking at the camera. So,
yeah. We are walking towards some known milkweeds, so we can show the people who asked for monarch butterfly host plants. We did see one milkweed already, the wand milkweed, the side cluster milkweed. That was the one with the strange veins where they stick out on the top of the leaf and they're flat on the bottom of the leaf. But there are some more milkweeds at the herd. I think there are probably at least 5 species here at the herd.
and if you go back and watch the video later, you can, if you missed it earlier, you can see that milkweed as well.
Okay, we're going to turn left.
Do you want to talk about like how, what's what I'm looking for? The frequency with which they use the vining milkweeds.
Oh, yes, and there's some up here too, I think. If we can get to it. This one right over here. Okay, first stop. Yeah. Oh. Okay, so this is green milkweed. It actually has had some kind of creatures inhabiting it. There's a lot of debris underneath this seed head. I don't have my glasses on, I can't really tell. I do
Little
see some
tiny
ants.
ants,
Yeah. So ants may be farming some aphids on that. Here, let's try this seed, this flower head, which doesn't have as many creatures on it. I don't like the creatures on me so much. Now, one of the things you're going to notice about this milkweed is its large oval leaves. Not huge, but large, good size. And these little purple hoods down inside the flower. So you've got your petals there and you've got these little purple hoods. But those purple hoods don't come out very far. They're about half the length of the petals, not very long. On one of its cousins, the Antelope Horn's milkweed, it has sort of maroon hoods, and those come out pretty much to the ends of the petals. So a little bit of different morphology right there in the middle. This is the green milkweed, Asclepius Veridia, and it's a very good monarch host. Now this one is covered. Can you get that line of marching ants? Now that we've disturbed the ants, we can really see them marching down the stems. They were probably there working on an infestation of aphids or something that was on this plant.
Yeah, they will milk the aphids.
Yeah. One of the other things to see about this plant back here where the buds are is the shape of the buds. They're like little inflated balloons. They are star-shaped at the top. They start out a little flatter, but they're always taller and puffier than the buds on the Antelope Horn's milkweed, which are like little flat starfish pillows.
Starfish pillows.
Let's see if we can find our milkweed vine back this way. There's another green over there. So if you see an antelope, holler. Oh, it's like about an onion on the way.
Onion.
Okay.
It's going dry.
There we go. This weird looking thing is actually one of our local onions. It's an allium, and it's Allium canadense, variety canadense. I know it's the variety canadense because it has these large top onions. And the thing about this that's so weird is that it has a double gene set. It doesn't literally have to bloom. It can simply clone itself, and so it does. It has made genetically identical clones of the parent plant up top. And each one of those can simply break off and start a new plant wherever it falls.
So Peter Williams was asking if all of the native varieties of milkweed serve as monarch hosts.
They do, but monarchs prefer some over others. They really like the green, they really like the Antelope Horns. They like honeyvine milkweed, which is not an Asclepius species, but a related species that's super close relative of milkweeds. I have not seen them on the wand milkweed. Those leaves are pretty stiff and thick, and I think the monarchs might just have a little bit of trouble with those. They will use the Asclepius tuberosa, that orange one, but it's not usually their favorite. So while it's possible, each mother monarch is going to have preferences, and those preferences will change with the microclimate in your yard. So she will come along and actually test each plant With special spines near her back feet, she'll puncture the plant and she will chemically test the juices to see if that's a good place to lay her eggs or not.
Is it the alkaloids that she's looking for, or
Weird.
not really
You
sure?
can't get inside her head
Oh.
to tell exactly what her preferences
Come on.
are. But we think that she's probably testing for the presence of and the strength and the composition of the cardiac glycosides, glycoside in that plant, or the alkaloid compound. But we don't know. She may be testing for something else. She definitely has preferences. I know that there's a plant vine up here, but I don't see any antelope horns. Looking worse than in here.
Yeah, the antelope horns in areas that are fairly open, where you've got open spaces, which this is, it tends to lay flat on the ground. It will go on the horizontal.
There was a really nice colony up by the SRC gate.
Yeah. We may find the other, the antelope horns milkweed on the way back. We know where it grows in some places on the herd. Other places where it used to grow are now shady, and so it's not there anymore. We'll see if we can find you one of those.
Michael Salzgiver is asking about purple milkweed.
Purple milkweed, Asclepius purpurescens. That is a very, very uncommon plant of East Texas. It doesn't really grow in North Texas. I don't know if you could get it to grow in your garden. Lorelei shaking her head. Yes, you can get it to grow. She can get anything to grow. But it's not a native to this area.
It does fine in our black soil.
There's the invasive thistle.
That's one of them.
Yeah, go ahead and talk about that.
I don't even know what the heck that puppy is. That's ugly.
Oh, careful.
All right, somebody online, tell me which one this is. I am not sure.
Name that thistle.
It's not this is not bull thistle.
If Melanie's still there, she'll know.
Yeah, I've never seen this. That's very unusual. The petals of this are green. A little bit of color in here, but doesn't look anything like our native thistles. And it doesn't look like a bull thistle.
Yeah, so that one's not a bull thistle. That one is Carduus nutans, a nodding thistle.
Whoa!
But it is not native,
it's
correct?
Not native, and it's not old enough to show that nodding behavior yet. When it gets up a little higher, it will.
Manju is asking if swamp milkweed is native to us.
Almost. It's native to much further west than the purpurescens. It's more common than the purpurescens, and it gets almost up to Dallas. I'm going to look in here because I know that it's right back here.
Avens?
And, yeah, talk about that while I...
We'll talk about some avens here. All right, if Valerie Dalton is on the line, she knows this plant even better than I do. This is our native aven plant, and it's blooming right now. There's most of the flower. Very delicate, very pretty. This one is actually a fairly prolific seeder. Valerie gave 2 of these that she had rescued last year, or they came from her mom's place. I'm not sure which. But boy, howdy, do I have a pile of these, so thank you, Valerie. So if anyone else is going to want some volunteers, next year I will have volunteer avens to give folks. But very, very pretty, very dainty little flower on it. Very similar to the flower on the Dewberry, which we showed you the fruit of that a little bit earlier. But very nice plant, very pretty plant. That's about as tall as they'll get.
Did you find it?
Yep, here it is. Come on in. I think there's no poison ivy right in here. This is all like released other stuff. Okay, so I'm going to reach in and clean this shot just a little bit here to get that out. And what I wanted you to see was these heart-shaped leaves on a vine. And I want you to see in particular how they grow opposite each other on that vine. Let's see if I can... there you go. You see those leaves are attached right across from each other.
Oops, it's done.
There we go. This is one of our native milk vines. It is very closely related to milkweed. And I think that monarchs can probably use that. Something has been eating this one pretty heavily right there. But that doesn't mean it's a monarch. It could have been a grasshopper. Lots of things will mess with milkweed sometimes, including rabbits, believe it or not. But when you see these heart-shaped leaves that are opposite each other on the stem, it is probably one of our local native vining milkweeds. And there are several. This one, I know that this one is the Anglepod milkvine, because I've seen it bloom before and seen its pod right here. But there are a couple more that you would find.
Okay.
Here's one. Oh, look what I found. Okay, so this one is Toothache Tree. And Stephanie is zooming in to show you all the thorns up and down the trunk. There's a pair of little thorns in between each set of leaflets. And that one big long stem with all those little green things attached to it, that's one giant leaf. This is a compound-leaved plant. And in the winter, when these leaves fall, you're going to see hardly any sticks at all, because there just aren't very many. Most of what you see that you think are stems are actually the center spine of that leaf that holds the leaflets. So this is a toothache tree. And I know Melanie's going to tell us, if we don't tell, we have to tell first, that this is one of the very best host plants for the giant swallowtail butterfly.
And you want to elaborate why it's called toothache tree?
Oh, sure. Lorelei, you want to do that?
I have no earthly clue.
Really?
Oh, okay, I'll do that.
Barry, I know.
Okay. It's called toothache tree because back in the settlers' times, you didn't have ready access to medicine, and they had to learn some tricks from the Native Americans. One of the tricks that they learned was that the inner bark and the tender shoots of this tree will numb your mouth if you chew on them. So you can simply do that to dull the ache of a toothache. I think that's pretty much all there is to that story.
Yeah, it's good.
There we go.
It just makes it interesting.
Here's another green milkweed.
Nancy, this will be available elsewhere. Oh, another green milkweed.
This time a little bit taller and not in bloom yet. But if you're interested in monarchs and you're looking for monarch eggs, you need to look right in where those buds are, because a lot of times the monarchs will lay their eggs right in between the buds.
Oh.
And the caterpillars won't even eat the leaves. They will eat flowers. And sometimes people don't even know they've got monarchs on their plants because they're eating the flowers, and it's very hard to tell that there's a flower or a piece of a flower missing. It's much easier to tell when the leaves have been chewed on.
And Melanie was excited that you mentioned about the toothache tree being the host plant.
Let's keep Melanie happy.
She's
She's a good sport about everything. All right, what else do we see that we want to talk about?
I don't know, but
We're heading into the gloomy
we're almost
part.
7:15, so do be aware.
Yeah.
quarter
so,
past. As long as it doesn't get dark.
Stephanie's on her second or third battery, so we're really
Oh,
not
this one's
sure.
pretty good though.
Okay, well we may just take you till dark then.
It didn't give me a warning yet on my phone,
Yeah.
but I was being proactive.
Okay. Let's take the boardwalk trail to the right and see if we can go that way and find anything. There's another milk vine that was easier to see.
Where would you find caterpillars on the toothache tree? That's a question for Melanie. I'm assuming probably they're going to like the leaves.
Yes.
Because they're going to need tender material to be able to eat with their teeny tiny mandibles.
Yeah. So finding the caterpillars on the toothache tree is really kind of fun because they look like bird poop. It is literally called the bird poop caterpillar by some people because it just looks like a big blob of bird poop.
I've seen one, and it does. Coralberry? No.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Big hunk of coralberry.
With no berries yet.
Well, no,
Because it's
we
too
won't,
early.
we won't see the berries on this until late fall. But this is another one that very definitely, this clones itself, coralberry. This is one that you can find at nurseries around here. It is an understory plant. If you put this out in a yard again, where it's got really beautiful conditions, this will take off. And I had one, and then suddenly I woke up one morning and I had 3. I had no idea. But again,
So make sure you have
this
space.
This is a really good one in terms of the birds will enjoy the berries on that in the wintertime.
Oh, there went a heron up there.
Yep. Although it is not beloved of the cedar
Right
waxwings.
Let's see, right up in here. Oh, wow.
Extras.
So this one's extraordinary. Yeah, and this is another one of those Canada onions, or prairie onions, the Allium canadense, and you can see that it's done some really weird stuff. Some of these have actually put up a bloomscape with another bud on the top, And then that bud could open and have more of these. It could have some regular flowers, or it could just have sort of grassy foliage above it. And honestly, I've seen these with 3 layers, where the ones at the top of the original stem have done something, and then those have opened, and then those have opened and done something else. So 2 layers is about as much as you usually see, but 3 is not impossible.
Which species is this?
Allium canadense, variety canadense also. Okay. Yeah. The Allium canadense has funny. About 5 or 6 varieties within it, but they're all quite distinct.
And in case you didn't know, the herd does have a wetlands if you haven't been out here before, and it's probably one of my favorite spots around here.
It probably bears saying that the herd has been open, the trails have been open the entire time. One of the places that we are safe is out in nature. So do take advantage of this time.
Just be responsible.
Just be responsible. It's easy to stay 6 feet away from folks. Honestly, it is. You can spread out on a trail fairly easily. But the herd has been open. The trails have been open.
Okay, so back here in the woods, there's a grass, and it is very upright. It's got this thing that looks like wheat on the top, and it is one of the wild ryes. I think that this one is the Virginia wild rye. It's very upright and straight, but oh, maybe not. Maybe it's Canada wild rye. This one is starting to droop over. The way you tell the difference is Canada wild rye, the seed heads droop over. Virginia, they stay up, and there's also some differences in the awns, these little bristly pieces in the grass. In the Virginia, they're quite straight and shorter, and in the Canada, they're longer. So this one is just beginning to bloom out. It's a little bit harder to see. If some of you had good eyes back here, you might be worried about me standing next to this plant, which kind of looks like poison ivy, but it's not poison ivy. This is box elder.
And she's gonna touch it to prove it.
I am. I see. I'm gonna feel that thing. It's all okay, because if I turn this over, right in here, you're going to be able to see that the leaves are attached in an opposite way to that stalk. And so box elder does that. Poison ivy is alternate. I know in my heart this is not poison ivy.
I believe it. And Michael pointed out there is a night hike this Saturday. I think these spots may be full because we lowered the number that we're accepting simply because we want to be absolutely sure that we can properly social distance and keep everybody safe. So I'm not sure on that, but you can watch for that. And of course we will have them later as well. Oop, and I think Carol's trying to show something.
Sorry, I get distracted by leaves very easily. So this is one of those greenbrier shoots that I was talking about earlier back on the prairie. See if you can get the top of it right here. It's got little tendrils that the plant would use to attach itself, and then the little heart-shaped leaves. And this is the part that's so nutritious, the very top that snaps off easily. That's the part that's really full of protein that the animals, somehow they missed one. There we go.
And as you pointed out, the leaves are much bigger here in the shade.
Yes, yeah, they are.
I have one. My favorite.
And there may be a beaver dam here. I just wanted to mention that. Peter asked if both wild ryes are native to North Texas.
Yes.
She said yes.
All right, in case you have never seen this, this is another nice understory plant that we have here. This is called bedstraw. It's also called the Velcro plant. You see it kind of sticks, but if you take a little piece off of that, it will actually stick to your clothing. If I'm out with a group and I have some kids with me, I love to hand them a piece of this because they're going to have that all over their siblings immediately. But it is called the Velcro plant, and it's also called bedstraw. The reason they called it the bedstraw plant is because they would cut this, and it does contain a certain amount of natural insecticide or insect repellent properties in it, and when dried and used as the ticking in your mattress back in the day, this would actually help to keep down the critters that were sleeping with you.
Sweet.
So there you go. That's one I happen to like.
Wow, that is
with its size.
that is huge.
Yeah, so this is an enormous leaf, and it happens to be a greenbrier leaf. It's one of the biggest ones I've seen all day. We're back here in a very shady area compared to the little tiny stiff ones that were out on the prairie. These are huge.
Needs
And
bigger
then
solar
this is
panels.
another species of greenbrier back there with a sort of halberd-shaped leaves. I see a giant onion.
Hold on, I'm gonna get the beaver dam. Also, I believe there's a beaver dam here. Not 100% sure, but thinking so, which is pretty cool, because they're cool. They're great engineers.
Yeah. Can we go this way?
Sure.
Okay. let's
We're
go
just
behind.
following.
Maybe, just maybe we'll see green feathers.
Where we go to the wood duck trail.
Little tiny minnows.
Okay. So here in the swamp, we find a number of American elms growing. Really big leaves with this asymmetric base to them. And these have not succumbed to Dutch elm disease. They're still here.
Is that an alternating leaf pattern? I mean, what? How do you describe that?
Yeah. You mean you
I mean, technically.
teeth on the edge, or it is alternate.
Okay.
And it also has sort of uneven teeth along the edge. Oh, that's
Ooh,
fun.
neat.
Let's do that.
Fuzzy.
What died?
No, sorry, nothing died. That is seedhead. From what? I have no earthly clue.
This is probably why my nose
Cottonwood.
is.
Cottonwoods?
Or,
Oh, well,
or
that makes
no,
perfect sense.
willow. Let's see. Whose leaves does it have?
Let's-
It has willow leaves. So this is willow fuzz.
Willow fuzz. So there's
I never
leaves.
knew they were that fuzzy.
They are. There we go. There's one around here somewhere. There should be. It's a swamp.
That
Where
or
is it?
a bird broke 'em off.
Something's making a whoo.
Either that or the fuzz
Oh, there goes great blue hair.
fell on the willow piece and stayed there when it flew down the boardwalk. So
We may never know. Oh, there goes the American crow.
okay. We're listening to little frogs clacking, almost like shaking up the beads in an old-fashioned spray paint can. And I think this burl on this willow, here's your willow, is very interesting. At some point there was some damage to the tree trunk, and the tree has responded by creating these burls to seal that off.
Yep, cricket frogs, that's correct.
Those little Canada onions are all through the understory here on the ground.
Little animal burrow. Down there.
A lot of little footprints down in the dried mud. Something's been back there.
Somebody's pointing out the cardinal vocalizing in the background.
If we're lucky, maybe we'll find the green dragons blooming.
Ooh. Oh, here's the purple top, I think, right?
Yeah, let's look at this. So this is the, here are some more onions. And they're also Allium canadense. It doesn't matter whether these are purple or white. What it means is in this particular subspecies, this one might have come from one of the other subspecies that had more pink in the flower. But all the ones with these top onions get lumped together in the Allium canadense, variety canadense species and subspecies.
Nice. Oh, sorry. What are these? What are?
I think there's more where we can see them.
Oh, okay, good.
So
Sorry.
we're gonna pass the ones where we have to wade into the ticks.
I don't mean to.
We're gonna see if we can find some where our cameramen can stay fairly secure.
Okay. It's kind of like a squirrel,
Yeah, yeah. No, I know what you mean. I thought
a purple squirrel.
we can find a better one. There should be a bunch up here too. In the Lavender Horn.
Wow, look at all the milkweed out there.
Yeah. So can you take a picture of that?
Oh, and all the deer.
Oh yes, please.
Can you guys see all the deer out here? Running right here, right there. Let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 out there.
Oh, 7, 8. There's more over there.
They're all feasting on the prairie.
And then show them a little closer up how much milkweed is blooming out here.
And then you can see all this milkweed. Basically anything that you're seeing with a round top. Almost, probably.
Oh, the deer are coming towards us.
What?
For some reason, the deer have decided we're worth checking out. And they're walking towards us. We don't have anything to offer them.
Oh, there goes another hummingbird. Do you hear it?
That's priceless.
Yeah.
So there is quite a bit of nice grass mixed in here that's still young and tender. Perfect for deer. They're probably responsible for ripping most of the shoots off the greenbriers. And they will also eat the young leaves from various shrubs. It's like we have a mixed herd of males and females. Beautiful.
Clay Thurman said, "Look, humans." Yeah, Lulu, we're not sure what the deal is, because usually the deer around here are still pretty timid, but it's possible a neighbor is.
Yep, decide to try to feed them.
Yeah, the milkweed is great here. Somebody was commenting that the population is fantastic.
Yes, it's quite dense. That's good. I also see an American bumblebee working on this milkweed between us and the deer.
Oh, not close.
Yeah.
We are not in their escape route.
Hi guys. Cool.
I'm gonna zoom back out so I don't make you guys sick with the wobbling.
Okay, we need to start looking for the green dragon.
Green dragon.
And we're getting into its territory. So we are back on the Wood Duck Trail. And on the Wood Duck Trail there is some green dragon. We don't see it every year. Some years we're lucky enough to see it. Some years we're really lucky and it'll be blooming. So we'll see if we can find any today.
What time period does it usually bloom?
Right now.
Okay.
First week in May is pretty good for that in North Texas.
And it's very short.
Yeah, it is, and it has a really specialized habitat, so you're not going to find it out on the prairie. You're going to find it in a place that's wet a lot of the time.
Yeah, I'll go with this one. This is the remnants of the Illinois bundle flower. Another one in the legume family. This one's an annual, but it gets its name from this is the seed head, which is a collection of little teeny tiny seed pods, which look like little individual peas or pea pods, and that kind of gives you an idea. This is again in the legume family, so this is another really nice nitrogen fixer. If it's got any seeds left in it, Not very well.
Can you hold it
doesn't-
here? There we go.
There you go. Okay, sorry. I'm not used to this.
Oh, I know. The lighting's weird right now.
Which is...
You know what I mean?
Tell me my angle, Mr. DeMille.
So this is... the... What did you say it was?
This is the Illinois bundle flower.
And that's its seed pod.
And that is the seed pod. Very unassuming little white puff of a flower comes out in the spring. It'll probably start blooming somewhere in the next 2 weeks or so. But this is the seed pod, which is the much larger and much more impressive thing that it produces. And again, these are all individual seed pods when you crush it up. That's what it looks like.
And now she spreads it.
Yeah, there you go. And then you throw it back out. Why? Because. That's what you're supposed to do.
And the deer are still over there, by the way.
Yeah. No worries. I find weird stuff, I talk about it.
Remind me, those are, remind me what these are.
Which?
These.
Oh, those are violets.
That's what I was thinking, but with
Those are our native violets. Again, you get those on the, usually they're somewhere in the periphery, not in the interior so much, but on the edges of your riparian areas or your forested areas.
in the absence of flowers, I was not 100%.
I understand. I get that way with a lot of them too, although I've gotten much better. Not gnats. It's gnat season. By the way, for all of you who are going outside, yes, the chiggers are active, so do beware. Oh, a beautiful fungus.
Ooh, fungi.
I love a fungus. I live for fungi. That's an absolutely beautiful one. Can you see that through there? Let's see. Yeah, you can.
It's kind of washed out, is the only thing.
Yeah, it's a little washed out. But still, anytime you're in one of these woodland areas, don't just ooh-ah over the things that are right next to the trail. Look in, especially on the fallen trees, because you have an awful lot that will be going on there in terms of different kinds of fungus that you'll find.
And look up in the trees, because that's where you'll often find the birds.
As a nod to our friends at Audubon, yes, look up, because that's where you find the birds.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to find the green dragons today. It's a little grown up back here. I do see small anthus back there.
What are the green dragons related to?
Oh, that's a good question. Jack and the pulpits would be their closest relative that you may have heard of. So they're Aracema dracontium, and Aracema triphyllum is the Jack and the pulpit.
Because somebody was asking what a green dragon is.
They're
And
pretty weird looking, and so if we do find one, it's going to be worth seeing. Look a little branch back here, and that was a little bit grown up where they were. So, where are we going?
Again, a non-native jasmine, right smack out here in the middle of nothing.
honeysuckle.
So, honeysuckle, sorry. Jasmine, honeysuckle. But just because they tell you, oh, this can't possibly, this will just stay on your property.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. It moves. And I've had many examples of that. Folks, be careful with what you plant in your yard, because again, the entire purpose of every living thing is to make more of itself, to pass on its genetics. And it will do so any way it has to. It will clone, it will produce seeds, whatever it must do to continue its genetic line.
There were some in here. I don't see any that I can find. They may be here, but they're really good at hiding. They have leaves that kind of tend to blend into everything else. Step down, step down. Be careful.
It's probably because we're on camera looking for it.
Yes, no doubt. We're going to skip this one today.
Wink, wink.
Skip this one. And then we're good. Okay, no green dragons today. This is where you look for them, but not today.
Well, see, that's why you say it really loud, and then you come back and look for them.
Okay, well, we are getting on to a section where I know there's some good wildflowers. So hopefully we'll get there while there's still some daylight. And before you all fall asleep.
We still have 69 people watching. That's still pretty good.
We appreciate you sticking with us.
We sure do. growing this kind of thing, there's another similar but different thing coming up. Leela, Lake Louisville Environmental Learning Area is, or Louisville Lake, I can never remember which, is also filming a series of nature walks. Well, we hope you do all come out to the herd and enjoy the trails here. It's a beautiful place.
Melanie said she couldn't find the green dragons 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think they
She was
were
looking.
overwhelmed with vegetation.
Whew.
Yeah.
And a nice one too.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay, down in here is, you may have purchased some things called Mexican petunias for your yard that are in the genus Ruellia. This is one of our local ones. That is poison ivy, Stephanie,
Ooh.
back there, so be
Wait.
careful. I'll pull it
Oh, I see it now.
forward.
Sorry.
There we go.
Yeah.
I was trying to get the leaves.
Yeah, there we go. And we have a couple of different Ruellias in North Texas. But they can all be, well, you can call them all Ruellia, or you can call them all Mexican petunia if you wish. I'd have to get out my book and key that one out to figure out which one it is.
Ruellia humilis is got a thicker, fuzzier leaf.
Yeah, the humulus is short and fuzzy, and there are strepins, there's
Yeah, that's
Carolinianum, there's nudiflora, nodiflora, something like that. Sometimes it's nude, sometimes it's nude.
Yeah, we'll put a drape on it for the sake of modesty.
There's a prairie parsley where you can really see the whole structure.
It's very thick too.
Yeah. Here's another one that has a basil rosette, and then in its second year pops up and blooms. That prairie parsley, good for black swallowtails.
Sorry, what are you looking for?
Delphiniums right around the corner.
Oh, okay.
They should be open too, I would think, unless they finish. Maybe where the beaches are. This has kind of gotten out of hand here. We talked about the dogwood and the coralberry, the way it can form thickets. And there's one other, this here, and the greenbrier. So here we have a mixed thicket of coralberry, greenbrier, and back there, one of the thicket forming native plums. This is just about impenetrable to us, but for a rabbit or a bird that is looking to get away from predators, this is actually kind of a valuable piece of real estate.
I think there's some rattlesnake master up there as well. It's not in bloom, but obviously, but
There is. There are a little bit further white ones on the left, maybe? Oh, you're right. There's one way out there, but not.
there's some over there. That's where we were earlier.
There's a couple coming up.
Well, we'll do the little blue stem.
Oh, we've got it.
Okay, we're going to
Oh.
do a little blue stem. And all
There's some right there.
Still holding its color. This is known as the anchor of the prairie. This is little blue stem. This is a typical height for it. It's about 3.5 feet in height. And in the fall, it turns this lovely copper color. So it does add an awful lot. This is one of the nice, well-behaved native grasses. It doesn't get too tall. And whoa, this is why I wear knee pads, people. I'm about to tumble over. But this is one that you will find from San Antonio all the way up to Manitoba. So this follows the entire prairie system all the way up through North America.
And these little blades are part of
Yeah,
the cluster.
and that's part of the cluster. They call them bunch grasses because they do grow in a bunch. They don't look anything like a lawn grass as you would know it. But they're very attractive in the winter. Again, you'll have the seeds will be growing off of the sides of the stem, white, fluffy, very lovely. Typically are going to be dispersed by the wind or by birds. These are beloved of the songbirds, particularly a variety of your sparrows and finches will happily feed on the seeds of the blue stems.
So that's a wonderful one if you are thinking about possibly adding some native grasses to your landscape. Usually the two that are most popularly available and suggested are little blue stem and side oats. And of course, side oats, Grandma, being our native, our state grass. So be patriotic of Texas, folks, and put in some native grass. Yes, there it is. I love that plant.
Yeah. So scattered throughout this little piece of the prairie, there are some delphiniums that are starting to bloom. Not all of them are very tall. This beautiful plant is also called larkspur. There is a little spur that comes out the back of each of the flowers, and that's full of nectar. That's where the bees and the butterflies have to get their tongues into to get the nectar out of this flower. The leaves are very much, they're sort of cut and interesting, like the leaves of a wine cup. This one back here, you may be able to see that leaf if Stephanie gets in close there. But this is called Prairie Larkspur, Delphinium fluorescens. It's sort of had a name change. It used to be Carolinianum. Also in this section, we're going to see a bunch of the stiff goldenrod and the coneflower in other seasons. A little bit of prairie phlox back here. Yeah, here we go. The phlox pilosa mixed in.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch right over here on the right.
Okay.
Well, they're easier to see.
Where?
Rattlesnake master.
Oh, okay.
I'm also looking for
Okay. Rattlesnake master is actually a cousin of that odd thing that we saw earlier, which is the Ringo. But this is rattlesnake master here. It looks as if it's almost kind of like a cactus because it's got these little side things. These are actually not prickly at all, so no harm, no foul. Beautiful native. This is one of the seed stalks you can't really see, but it actually is sort of an egg shape. And each one of these again is made up of multiple individual flowers. So these are, when they bloom in the late summer, these are very much beloved of our small butterflies like the hair streaks and the skippers, and also our small bees. Absolutely love on these. Absolutely gorgeous plant. This is a real nice one to put into a garden setting because it's it's architecturally interesting.
Okay, I'd like Stephanie to come over where I'm standing and kind of get down a little bit lower and just pan across this wildscape we're seeing here. All these beautiful wildflowers tucked into the grasses. Some of the foliage of the wildflowers you can't even see. It began to grow and gather light before the grasses came up and took over. If you're short on the prairie, you bloom first, and then the taller things come a little bit later. But it's quite lovely out here, especially in the last of the daylight.
Lulu, remind me, it's rattlesnake master is what? Eucafolium? Eringo, and it basically translates to yucca
The
foliage.
yucca-leafed eringo. Yeah.
Because Lulu was asking.
Yeah.
It is a perennial, as opposed to the Ringo itself, which is an annual.
Yeah. I was scouting something out while Lorelei was talking about rattlesnake master, but if you haven't grown that in your garden, it is just gorgeous. It performs really well in an average garden with not too much water. Yeah, I know. Oh, thanks. You found them, you found them. Oh, it's so dark, I think I'll take my hat off.
Yeah, I do that.
You can see where I'm going. Alright. I'm gonna do... Now let's move on through the woods and get to the cool stuff on the other side. There's some fairly nice things over there, I think.
Another neat gull down there.
Yeah. We're seeing a lot of Virginia creeper, again with the Japanese honeysuckle, and also some of the native milk vines on the ground here, as well as the Canada Sanicle. Is this the Sanicle or the GM? I think this one is Canada Sanicle with the 5 leaflets rather than the 3 of the GM. And it's just a little plant that grows in the understory, particularly damp woods. It likes that a lot. And you'll see it growing with the GM. When they're small, they're hard to tell apart. Another one of those native milk vines tucked into the base here with the little heart-shaped opposite leaves. And a lot of Virginia creeper, the 5-leafed vine that looks a little bit like poison ivy if you're not counting.
If you're not counting. Oh, something just slithered under there.
Yeah, so there's a Virginia creeper leaf. Stephanie has a good one in her view there. You can see the 5 leaflets. Here is one of the milkweed vines that is a little bit more mature. It's got fairly big leaves on it already, big tough ones. Hi, Lorelei.
Got some ragweed.
This is actually a sunflower that grows in the shade back here. It's not Maximilian sunflower, it's not annual sunflower. It's a sunflower called roughleaf sunflower, and it actually loves to grow in the understory of the woods. So who could beat a short sunflower that's perennial and blooms in the shade?
I planted some last year and it managed to come back.
Yeah.
I was pretty excited.
You sound surprised.
Well, I didn't take very much care of it, you know.
Nobody's taking care of it out there. It takes care of itself.
Well, but it was its first year in a transplant. So I was, you know.
It's a pretty tough plant.
There's usually fish in here. What is that?
The noise or
Maybe, oh, no. It's a big piece of bark or something. Oh, sorry. Some people are asking questions. What bird is chirping in the background? I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Oh, somebody in Wallkill, New York is watching
Really?
and enjoying
New York.
all our green.
Cool.
No, what was it again? The sunflower. Here.
Oh, Helianthus hirsutus, roughleaf sunflower. It's a perennial.
Roughleaf sunflower.
When the heart has its plant sale, sometimes we have that.
Oh, butterfly.
Somewhere in here there's tomato, so we look out for the leaves of it. Tomato's here. Lots of greenbrier. Can you kind of pan over this greenbrier?
Sure.
So some of the greenbriers are pretty active too about vining up and clambering over things. And if you look, you can see where it's actually shading out the honeysuckle for a change. So this is not as common to see the greenbrier winning over the honeysuckle, but you do occasionally.
Michael, the plant sale will be in October, so mark your calendar. Is it the 3rd through 5th, I believe? I think it's the 3rd through 5th. Don't quote me on that,
No.
but heartmuseum.org/plant sale. It's a date. I mean, has a date.
Another one of those prairie parsleys blooming all over the place. The things in the parsley family typically have these little umbels. And if you think of an umbrella with little spokes of equal length and each topped by a point of the umbrella, these pretty much do the same. Each little point is topped by a flower. And then you have an umbrella of umbrellas. So this is a compound umbel.
Lorelei, Deb was asking which grass the paintbrush grows with. Wait a second. Wait till we get closer.
Little blue stem is very definitely one of the, as it were, hosts for the Indian paintbrush. That is known. Others as well, but the most people, if they're going to try to grow it, they will try to grow it with the little blue stem.
And it is a parasitic relationship?
It's a hemiparasitic.
It makes some of its own food, but gets other portions of its food from its host plant.
Yeah. So it does not kill the grass on which it is, from which it is borrowing nutrients, but it very definitely does need to have that grass. There are a wide variety of different methodologies to try to get those to germinate and to grow. Nature does it without a problem. Humans struggle. I struggle. I mean, it's everything from you plant, the grass seed and the Indian paintbrush seed together and let them come up together. Others will say, no, you should take, an existing one, an existing grass, and then you damage the roots around it, and then you seed in that area where you've damaged the roots. I've tried it all, and it hasn't worked yet, so, oh well.
Deb?
I'm lucky enough to already have it at the farm, so I haven't tried.
Like I said, nature can do things with complete ease, and we struggle to try to accomplish the same thing.
Yeah.
Deb said thanks for the response.
Not a problem.
And Victor, we did have that sunflower at last year's plant sale.
We'll give him a shout out, courtesy of Bill Freiheit.
But that's it's definitely one of the rare plants that we get, so definitely it helps to be a member so that you can get early access. And this is our bullfrog pond.
I've got the wrong boots on for aquatic.
We should do an aquatics day though, that would be fun.
I don't have a high boot that can do that kind of stuff.
Oh, well, we can do this.
Oh, bushy blue stem.
Yeah, or that way if the light's better. So this lovely cinnamon colored tufty topped grass is a bushy blue stem. And you notice where we are. We are right next to the bullfrog pond, which is going to overflow into this area from time to time. This grass really likes a low area that gets inundated with water from time to time. It's happiest when its feet get wet sometimes. Which way do you want to go?
Up to you guys. It's actually easier to go, well, this would go that way,
Do you want to go that way?
but we can go by the boathouse as well.
Oh, okay, you lead.
Okay, we'll go this way.
That'll be better for you. Actually, nice and hot.
Enjoy the sunset.
We've definitely more than fulfilled our, the folks who needed an hour's wildflower walk. So
Maybe they can get an extra hour's credit in now.
I don't know if the Master Naturalist will give extra credit, but certainly they will have their full hour's worth on this one.
So it's a little deeper than I realized.
Find antelope horns out here. Those definitely ones where I got in the grass.
It's okay. I plan on taking a very thorough shower this evening. Oh, you know what? I should have taken us this way. Oh, there's a nice dewberry. Nice dewberry.
What one?
And a nice little dewberry.
I see 'em. Okay.
Ripening apple.
Yeah.
This bird is missing out.
Okay.
Okay. And this is a section I don't travel very often, so we may see something new. We may not. Look at all the Angleman daisy blooming out to the right. Lots of it. All that yellow
Oops.
is the Angleman's daisy.
Luann Ray said that Blackland Prairie Master Naturalist still watching may log 2 hours of AT.
Yay!
right,
Thank you, Luann.
If people will stick with us and we've got light, we'll keep roaming around. Yeah.
I mean, we can do 2 hours of EH too, right? So,
Melanie said the trees on the left were stoked with berries.
yes, they were. We didn't. You want to like photograph that little
Sure.
mott of trees? So western soapberry tends to grow in a little grove like this. It like the dogwoods that we talked about, form thickets. It will send up little runners and shoots, and you mostly see groups of them. You almost never see just one by itself. This little goodie here
Yeah, I was gonna say,
isn't open. I'm sorry we didn't get this one earlier.
like this
But
one?
this is a relative of the tomato.
Is there an open one there?
Lorelei's got some that are closer to be.
But it's got a little bit more color.
This
So
is western horse nettle. It is in the tomato family. If you look underneath those leaves, let me see if I can flip one up. There's a row of spines underneath.
Ooh.
And so you don't want to just go grab one of these. They have spines hidden all over the place. But when those flowers are open, they're shaped a lot like tomato flowers, and they must be buzz pollinated like tomato flowers. So you need something like a bumblebee or another native bee that knows how to buzz pollinate to pollinate these. We might still find one of them.
And this is one of the ones that produces fruits that look very similar to tomatoes, correct?
Yeah.
That are very poisonous.
Little yellow tomatoes out on the prairie are not tomatoes.
Don't eat them. Ooh, my shoelace. Here, will you hold this for just a sec? You
Sure.
can talk into it while I...
well, I don't know if which direction is which. Oh, that's the direction. And we want to focus on this. Oh, well, we've got some nice,
Found your milkweed.
there we go. There's the Antelope Horn milkweed. I'm taking over as cameraman now. No, okay, Stephanie won't let me do that.
Okay, there where you can see this.
There's
one
also a
little
milkweed
closer.
beetle.
Yeah,
you see?
yeah. Well, yeah. They're usually not my friends, but that's all right.
For
He's
those who
here
want the
doing his
seeds, they're
thing.
not the friend.
Yeah. So here we have the Antelope Horn's milkweed, very close relative of the green milkweed that we saw earlier. But have a look at those hoods in the middle. They have white ends instead of purple ends. They have maroon centers instead of being lavender all down the length. And look how far out they go. They go way out to the edges of the petals. So this is one of the keys to telling the difference between the Antelope Horn's milkweed and the green milkweed. Now, Stephanie, if you back up just a little, you'll see that that flower head is very, very round. It's like softball to baseball size, but it's organized. It's very organized. The green milkweed has flowers that are kind of loose and blousy and a lot less regimented in their positions on that flower ball. So this is the Antelope Horns. Let's have a look at the leaves. Longer, slimmer, and pointier than the green milkweed leaves. Not those ovals, but something a bit, more linear, more lanceolate than the oval leaves of the green milkweed.
Move this one out.
Yeah, and if this one weren't really buried in the grasses, here's a nice one way down in there with a milkweed bug. Let's see if we can get down in there. There you go. That's a good looking flower head, not too worn out, not too dried out. And that's a milkweed bug. They will suck the juices from the plant. They particularly love to suck the juices from the developing seeds right through the pod. Now, antelope and green are a little bit more resistant to that than some of the other milkweeds. For good reasons, but too detailed here. And he's just going to hang out until the pod splits open and lets them in to devour those seeds.
Oh,
Oh no, it's not really open. It's
Well,
sort of the same.
I can still kind of...
Switchgrass, good, I like that.
It's switchgrass. That's not that bad of a clump.
Well, that's it.
I touch my breath.
So you guys can kind of see a little bit. Okay, sorry.
That's all right.
Dark fur. I'm yawning. All right, so let's talk about switchgrass. Again, this one's not too terribly much beyond 5 foot, but these guys are typically they're going to like to have the two varieties. One is an upland and one is a lowland. They go by the same scientific name, but there is a distinct difference. These are much taller. As you can see, these are 5 foot. They will, on a good day, they'll reach 7. Okay. but these happen to like having wet feet. So again, you're going to find these in the low spots. You're going to find them in areas where their feet can stay wet or get wet. And great cover. You can see this one's not the biggest clump, but still you can see this is, you know, a nice big thicket here where you can get some, if you're a bird, you're a small mammal, guess what? You can hide. And when you think of our beautiful birds of prey circling overhead, guess what? This is a really nice place to hang out and hide. Also, the seed heads, these are the seed heads long since spent. These are usually picked over. These are a desired seed by our birds, and these are usually picked over pretty early on in the winter. There are certain seeds that the birds, the songbirds in particular, will prefer, as well as the rodents if they can get their hands on it. The Tritons family, the purple Tritons as well as the white Tritons, are beloved of the finches and the sparrows, and they also are very fond of this. If you like the buntings, the painted buntings, the Texas cupgrass, another beautiful native here to Collin County. Texas cupgrass is a favorite of theirs. That was the only time I have ever had a painted bunting. It happened to be a female that showed up in my yard in Plano, and she would fly up, grab a hold of the Texas cupgrass stalk that had the seeds on it, go down to the ground, and run her beak along to pull all the seeds off. They're really fascinating to watch.
And Melanie was advocating for the milkweed bugs. She said you don't have to kill them because they don't hurt the milkweed or caterpillars.
Yeah, I don't actually kill the milkweed bugs either. They won't destroy your milkweeds. There are some other beetles that can really do in a milkweed, but that large milkweed bug, it's really not worth it.
That's a good clean. I love jumping.
Oh, look at that one. That's 1 in 5.
Wow.
All right, remember Lorelei's 5 feet tall, so that's a good 7.
I can hide back in here. Guess what? I feel kind of like Artie Johnson.
That's a good 7.5 feet tall. And this is why small children in settler times walked out onto the prairie and got lost in the grass. It was literally over their heads, and they could not see in any direction to get their bearings.
Yeah. This is where the phrase prairie schooner comes from. It's because in the tall grass prairie, which is what the Blackland Prairie is, you could not see the wagon wheels. So it looked like they were just sailing along on the prairie grasses. So that's where prairie schooner comes from.
One of my
Sooner or
favorite
boomer, I have no idea, but prairie schooner.
edge of the prairie trees, and this one is the Bodark, the Osage orange, the horse apple. So many names for this tree. It's unbelievable. But it's so legendary. It's got its own fan club pages. So go look up Osage Orange and see if you're a fan.
Yes. Nice large spikes of these, which developed for a reason, which was to protect the fruit, now better known as horse apples, during the time of, for example, the giant tree sloths. Of course, you know, some things move slowly, and so to back away from that will take a very long time for that particular tree. So right now, it's actually putting a lot of effort into growing those very large thorns. What's the other one that does that?
Honey locust.
The honey locust. These were to protect the fruit while it was developing from these very large fruit eaters, and unfortunately the large fruit eaters are long gone, but the spikes still remain, and the plant is still putting energy into developing those big spikes of thorns.
And I will attest to that it does not feel good in your feet.
Plants learn slowly.
Sometimes things move very slowly. If you think about sort of geologic time, you have to be on that kind of scale.
It's kind of cool that they're sort of living fossils, though, in a way.
Well, you have to go by, the longer the lifespan, the slower the concept of adaptation is. So, for example, fruit flies, you can get them to, as it were, mutate rather quickly because their lifetime is pretty short.
Yeah. So I looked up and I saw something that looked like drips falling down. And what I actually was seeing was all of these persimmon flowers, which are falling in real time right now. And they're sort of bouncing on the pavement here around us as they fall from this tree above. This is a common eastern persimmon. It's the one that's native here. There's a different persimmon native to the hill country. These are never as big as the Asian persimmons that you're going to buy in the grocery store, but they're every bit as delicious when they ripen in the fall. Persimmons come in male and female trees, and so only some of them are ever going to have fruit. But there's been some discussion about whether they can actually change sex partway through their life. And so that's something interesting to pursue another time.
Apparently Melanie blew out a tractor tire on her honey locust
That
last
does not
week.
surprise me.
And those are bluebird boxes up there. White.
We are, if you're not able to hear all the details, we are hearing Carolyn wrens all over the place. We've been hearing cardinals. We've been hearing chickadees. We've been hearing so many different birds today.
Including the very loud Canada goose.
Stealth is not one of its adaptations.
So we've got western soapberry up there, I think. Or is that a Chinese pistache? I think so. Well, they used to be translucent. They're not translucent now. Maybe we'll skip. No details on that plant.
Somebody in the audience, please be an arborist.
It's a big world of Texas plants, thousands and thousands to think about statewide. Even here in the Blackland Prairie, there are hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, to know, to get to love. But no one person is going to be an expert in all of them. I can barely identify grasses, only a few really. And I'm not so great at trees, but I know people who can identify every tree that you see. So when you're looking for help IDing, try to find somebody that knows a little bit more than you do, and follow them around, learn from them what they've got to teach, and then follow somebody with a different specialty and see what they have.
Sage back there. Mealy blue sage.
Oh yeah, there's one out there. There's some right up here. Will we get there?
That's not buried in grass.
Yeah. We're trying to save Stephanie from going into the tall weeds. There should be some right through the gate, if not before the gate. I may have blown that. I don't know. Lost my stick.
You lost your stick?
Yep. I can get back out of it. Oh, you okay? Yeah. You might want to say one of the reasons these areas aren't infinite is the gravel. Buffalo grass? These little flags? So we're looking at this little grass, the lower ones. Buffalo grass with its tiny little flags left over from last year. It stays low. It comes in male and female plants. And only some of them make those little flags, of course. But it's a cute little prairie grass that grows really, really well as a lawn grass, as long as there's no Bermuda anywhere nearby to overtake it. Here's another milkweed relative, one of the Matilias. I can just barely get that loose to show there. This one's Matilia biflora with little fuzzy heart-shaped opposite leaves. And it's not blooming right now, but I bet you over there on that chalk slope there'll be some blooming.
That was a milkweed.
Yeah. No, I didn't see any more Millie Blue Sage. Oh, I messed that up.
I know there's, well, I know there's
Right
some
around
right up
the
there,
gate,
but
yeah.
there's also a nice patch of antelope horn right there.
Look at that one. There's usually some good stuff right over here. The corner of Daisy is all dried out right now. Yeah, there's a granddaddy milkweed. I actually have pictures of this milkweed from 2005. So I know that this particular plant has been here at least 15 years. And this one, just from the size of it and the number of stems it has out there, I would say it's a very old plant. These are taproot milkweeds, this one and the green one. And so they will stay right in one place for dozens of years, decades, maybe even longer, and bloom every spring. Okay, I'm getting tired.
I feel like the blooms of milkweeds aesthetically are underappreciated as well.
I do too. If people saw close-ups of these, they'd love them. Alright, there's a really nice thing with a daisy over there. Nice, sure. Wow.
The noise! The noise!
Sunflower. Let's see the sunflower real quick. We're about to lose all daylight.
We still have 54 people though.
Do we really? Well, we'll go across the street and see the Milkweed sage. So right here are the first couple of narrow-leaf coneflowers to start blooming this year. It's really a beautiful plant, and if it weren't so close to sunset, it would be covered with pollinators. The butterflies and the bees really, really love this plant. Can't say enough about how tough it is growing out on the prairie in almost bare chalk without any supplemental water at all. It's really designed to live in a harsh, dry, low nutrient environment. See that green milkweed, which looks awfully good?
Sure.
Yeah. It's another green milkweed. And zoom in and let's reinforce the difference in the hoods. So this actually has the lavender hoods. These are a little unusual. They're less lavender than most. They're almost white, but they're still much shorter than the hoods on the antelope horns. They don't go nearly out to the edges of the flower. So this is the green, and if she zooms back out a little bit, you can see how loose and blousy those flower clusters are compared to the really dense, really tight head on the antelope horns. Oh, there's antelope. Let's go see the antelope.
That's okay.
Yeah. And for contrast, here is the antelope horns again, with its more organized heads and the hoods that reach out further towards the edge of the flower, that almost starfish-like structure that starts at the center. All right, we promised the people mealy blue sage. Let's find it.
Let's show the
Is
leaves.
there some back that way? I know there's some over here. Let's go this way. I think
There is definitely some over there. Well, I need to do that gate at some point, but I can do it later. Are these, this is just the invasive rye?
yeah, let's talk about it.
Okay.
Okay. So there are quite a few invasive grass species, cool season grasses in North Texas, and really they're messing up the prairies fairly significantly. We have Japanese brome, we have oats, we have a perennial rye, also called Italian rye, and I think it's actually an annual, even though it's called perennial rye for some reason. But these grasses really were not supposed to be here, and they tend to pop up and overshadow some of the flowers that should be blooming in the spring that then can't bloom as well. So we'd love to get these all out of our prairies. Unfortunately, it's an uphill battle. They're fairly established. Lorelei says something. We like that.
Oh, there's a really nice patch over there.
You're up, Lorelei.
All right, Salvia farinaceae. Hopefully I have not massacred it this time. But this is the mealy blue sage, and this is the native. Many folks will probably be familiar with the cultivars, Henry Dewberry and his lovely wife, Augusta. Henry is purple and Augusta is white. Now, this one is our native. One of the things I tend to say about it is
that the native oftentimes will be a slightly paler purple, whereas the Henry Dulberg cultivar will tend to be a much darker purple. And a lot of that has to do with the amount of nutrients in the soil. For the native, I've discovered that they will get a much darker purple, but that seems to have more to do with nutrients in the soil. If you put down some cow manure on these and they get an extra dose, they will come up in the spring and be a little bit darker at first. But as it goes along, they will again go. I don't know what's being released into the soil. Usually color has to do with the minerals in the soil. So I'm not really sure what all the cow manure brought to that party, but I did have one that was a little bit darker than that.
Yeah, yeah. And this will sometimes form big patches out on a good prairie. There used to be more of it here at the herd. I'm not seeing as much this year as before. It may just not all be blooming yet, or it may have been crowded out by some of the bunch grasses, which have gotten fairly established.
Yeah, that is a pollinator favorite in particular.
Oh,
bumblebees love the Salvia farinaceae. If you have that, you will definitely find them out early in the morning. First thing you will hear the bumbles out there if you've got the Salvia farinaceae blooming. Very beautiful plant, but yes, it does seed quite readily. And if you have the cultivars, Henry or his lovely wife Augusta, they will not seed because, again, it's a cultivar. They want you to go buy a new one. They don't want you to have seeds from it necessarily, but it will clone ferociously. Henry and Augusta do clone underground.
there's a nice little patch.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
And
See?
FYI, those are purple martin
Martins.
houses that are currently being in use.
The purple martins should come streaming in here as dusk closes, and they frequently have a sentinel sitting out. There is that mealy blue sage again. It's gorgeous. It's readily available too. This is one of those natives that you can buy easily and try at home. And with pretty good success rate, it's pretty hard to mess up a mealy blue sage.
I'm not sure you can kill a mealy blue sage.
There's a paler one. Yeah,
Probably if you put it in shade and water it a lot.
yeah, that'll probably.
Yeah. It does not mind partial.
Partial shade.
It will lean. It won't be as upright. It will lean wherever it gets the most amount of sun. But it will do nicely on a partial where it only gets, say, for example, morning sun. I've had it in those circumstances.
Do you want to talk about Johnson grass? Is that Johnson grass?
Would you like an example of Johnson grass? Oh, let's talk about everybody's favorite Johnson grass. All right, so how do you tell the difference between Johnson grass and, let's say, for example, an Indian grass or a switchgrass? Well, there it is. It's got a white stripe right down it. There it is. Its plume is very similar to the plume of a switchgrass, but it will definitely put up its plume first. Okay. Switchgrass is not going to start coming out and having a plume head on it until much later towards the end of the summer. This will go whenever it can. This is a tough one to get rid of. The folks who are at the Connemara Conservancy can definitely tell you that. Any place that has had to battle this one, it is hard to get rid of. Fire will not get rid of it. It laughs at most everything. If you try to pull it out, dig it out, you name it, frequently places that are infested with this resort to, as it were, chemical warfare. Because it is such a bear to get this out once it's established. One of the things you can do, at least to minimize some of your problems, if you have an area that does already have some of this in there, is to prevent it from going to seed. If you can prevent it from going to seed, then you can stop the spread. Now, obviously, if you've got 60 acres of Johnson grass, this is not necessarily going to be helpful. Some people will say to mow.
For those that I know who have been combating this, who mow it regularly, the problem is it adapts very nicely, the same as does Scabiosa, to mowing. What it will
Learns
do
to bloom
is
short.
it will lay flat and it will put out its seed head right at ground level. So there are some things that are very tough to get rid of. For Scabiosa, one of the things, again, stop it from going to seed. You bloom heads, if you can't pull the plant itself out, you can just snap off the stalk and prevent it from going to seed.
And same with some of the thistles too, right?
Yeah.
But
So,
again,
these
if you've
are-
got 60 acres of it, it's tough to combat it
Yeah.
that
If you're
way.
trying to dig it out, that's a problem because the roots are firm and brittle like white fingers underground. And if you break off even a little piece, that will grow into a new plant. So it's either you get every speck of it out or you haven't done anything to it.
Yeah, it's a hard one to get rid of.
So what have we learned? It's easier to not bring the non-native invasives in than it is to get rid of them once they're here. The herd is still a great place to look at lots and lots of things that are native and belong here and aren't seen as much anymore. We hope you'll all come out and give it a try. It's a beautiful place. It's sort of gem in the heart of McKinney, and it deserves your attention and your support. I think it's about to get dark, and it's probably about time that we wrap this up. So for Lorelei and Carol, it's been great having you here with us at the herd, and come out sometime for real.
And hopefully we at NIPSOT will be back with our regular meetings as soon as we logically can be. But in the meantime, we are going to try to find alternatives to, present to folks and do some other presentations like this so everybody can feel safe and stay healthy.
Would you like to tell your website?
Oh.
You can find your local NIPSOT chapter if you're far away at NIPSOT, that's NPSOT.org. From there, you'll find a whole list of chapters, and you can pull up a map of where those chapters are and find their websites on those hot links.
All right, and a shout out, of course, to the Master Naturalists who joined us, and we'll be getting, thank you, Luea, 2 hours worth of AT time because we don't shut up. And thank you very much to Stephanie, our wonderful camera person. Yay!
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Yep.
Good night.